So for people that might not know, tell us a little bit about what SnotBot is.
Sure. So SnotBot is basically a program run by Ocean Alliance, which is an organization that is based out of Gloucester, Massachusetts. And SnotBot, the original idea of the first SnotBot was to put a petri dish on top of a consumer type drone and fly through the plumes of snot that come out of a whale's blowhole and basically capture that snot on top of the petri dish so they could go back into the lab and do some testing. To get that data otherwise would have been very difficult, even with manned aircraft, to fly close enough where the whale would be willing to, surface and be able to plan when it would surface so that they could be there during that time, because whales can dive for significant lengths of time, and it'd be extremely costly. So drones really paved an avenue for this technology to be used in a way to get scientific data that was never available before.
Yeah, I had heard it described as chasing a person around a room with an air horn and a needle, and then saying, well, this organism is very stressed and whatever. You just wouldn't get the right data.
For sure.
So how did FLIR come to be involved in working with this program?
Sure. So I worked with Dr. Ian Kerr back when I was at DJI, so in the initial SnotBot phases. But then now he has what he calls FLIRBot. So FLIR donated Matrice 200 as well as MUSE XT thermal imaging camera to take this research to the next level. So basically what they're doing now is they're flying over these whales and looking down into, onto the body of the whale. What they're looking for is the temperature of the blowhole. Because thermal imaging cameras can give you an estimation, or basically using radiometry, you can get an estimation of the temperature of things without touching them. We're getting the first temperature readings of what a living whale's blowhole would be. It's kind of like putting a thermometer in your mouth, but we're doing that with drone technology. But Dr. Kerr is also using thermal imaging for what they call whale footprints. So as the whale kicks up water, as it's moving underneath, you could see that cold water rising to the surface, and then they're able to follow the whale easier, night or day, to be able to predict when it's going to come back up so that they can make sure they're ready to capture data when that does happen.
Okay. So is this a little different from the previous SnotBot that would fly inside the plume? Would you be above that?
Sure. So you could be close enough to do both at the same time. There's no reason why not. I think that if I were to guess, it's probably flying about 50 to 70 feet above the water, the surface, where they're gathering this data. Maybe for the SnotBot, they would fly a bit lower, but the reason is just so that wherever the whale pops up, you're able to make sure that that's within the frame to capture those images to do that post-processing.
Okay. And where were you while this was going on? You were in a boat nearby?
Yeah, so back in July, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a voyage that we went out and got these first radiometric readings of the whale's blowhole. And we were about a mile and a half maybe off of the coast of Gloucester or Rockport, Massachusetts. And we basically just came upon four humpback whales that were spending a lot of time just keeping their backs out of the water. And we were able to get a good number, over 100 different images that we could take back and do the research off of. But since then, Ian Kerr has been to Gabon and also has operations off the Gulf of California, near Mexico, where they're doing a lot of, basically getting a larger sample size of different specimens so they can go through and see what is relevant from this data they're collecting.
So what all can you tell about the health of the whale from both the capturing the snot and checking the temperature of the blowhole?
Sure. So instantly we knew that we had something valuable, and Dr. Kerr is working on some of those papers to release to show the science behind some of the claims. But there is talk of being able to see whether the whale is sick, and what those sicknesses are, I couldn't say, but also whether it's pregnant or not. Also, the gender of the whale can be approximated between the different temperatures of these blowholes and also the size of the blowhole, which would be difficult to really measure without UAS technology. So they're getting a lot of stuff that otherwise, you see a whale for maybe a fraction of a period of its life cycle, and it's really hard to time that, and it's really hard to know which whale you're looking at if they've changed. So they're basically getting the ability to research these animals in a way that was really, really difficult, if not impossible, before.
What are their plans going forward? I assume that they're going to try to get more samples and just continue this sort of measuring.
Definitely. So I think that not only to get a variety of within a different species, but also to use this in different seasons in different areas of the world. If you could get the same species and it's now, south of the equator, does that change the blowhole? Does their metabolism change, and does that affect the temperature of the blowhole? So there's still a lot to be done, and capturing it with the thermal imaging is a significant part of that research. But there's also work being done with photogrammetry, being able to take these images and be able to estimate the length of the whale and the width of from fin to fin, how wide it is, and start patterning their growth over a period of time. Because if you think about a scientist underwater swimming with whales, which very few have the privilege to do that legally, and to be able to do anything meaningful in research would be, really, really tough with something so big that can move so fast. So I think the next steps are just to keep doing what we're doing, and just get a larger sample size to really understand what we're learning.
Does your technology lend itself to other such studies of different animals or even in environments?
For sure. Within the animal space, I know that there are many zoos and zoologists around the world that are using this technology, largely to locate and to estimate populations without being invasive. So, howler monkeys in Panama have been done, turtles in Costa Rica have been done, anti-poaching missions also in Central and South America have been huge, rhinoceros, elephants. I've seen cases, very rare land-dwelling birds that are difficult to count because as soon as you get close, they scatter. So there's a lot that is being done. Butterflies, the University of Exeter is doing butterflies, which is, to me, was crazy at the time, but once I saw it, it was really compelling. So wildlife is huge for our technology. As far as environment goes, we can look at land and know whether water is being retained within the soil. Our product one of our cameras just got implemented into Micasense's new multispectral camera. So it's multispectral plus thermal, and they're able to, take out more data from a single image of the ground to know whether, crops are able to succeed and survive and thrive in these areas. So, we are big on doing environmental things, noticing gas leaks and stuff like that is also core to FLIR's competencies, but wildlife is close to my heart. I think that it's a really exciting and interesting way to apply it.
Has that always been sort of something the company was interested in doing, or is that a little bit of a more recent development?
I would say the company, at its core, we were doing military stuff. So I can't say that wildlife and habitat management was really at our core, but I think that whenever we can apply our technology to doing something better for the world, whether it's a firefighter and going into fires, or a military personnel getting home safely, or if it's preserving wildlife for future generations and making sure that the environment is sustainable, I think that all of those missions are equal to our excitement in putting thermal, whether it's in the air or on the ground.
And the systems are getting smaller and smaller. Some of your cameras are quite dinky these days.
Sure.
How does that affect, how they're able to be placed? The Matrice is not a huge vehicle, but it's a good size. But are you planning to just move them down to smaller and smaller systems?
Well, when it comes to unmanned systems, we know that power, weight, size are all very significant, and that's what we're looking to reduce for UAS platforms. Most of the cameras that you'd see on UAS today are Tau-2 based. We're moving that to a boson core, which is about a sixth of the size, about a tenth of the weight, and significantly less power consumption. So we can stay aloft longer, get more data in a single flight, which is, I think, beneficial for everyone without losing performance. I think that the next stages beyond that are to get higher performance of resolution, so that we can get more pixels on target, whether that allows us to fly higher or just to get more clarity of the image. Those are kind of the scientific breakthroughs that we're hoping to make in the upcoming years. But again, it's just more users doing interesting things and pushing us to make our technology better.
And do you have any some big plans environmentally coming up, say in the next year?
Environmentally, well, I mean, more of the same. Working with Ocean Alliance, working with some of the zoos that I had mentioned that we discussed with for wildlife preservation. But I also am anticipating we'll be doing some more work with the Sea Shepherd, which does counter poaching in the oceans, and helping them with their causes. And then, in the mission that we did in Svalbard, I think that we missed out on a lot of things we could have done, whether it was looking at polar ice caps and how they're receding and being able to do some sort of measurements during the winter when it's dark that you could do with thermal would be interesting. Polar bear dens, if once they're under the snow for the winter, you could fly over and likely that heat would push up through the ground, and it'd be interesting to see if that's a use case that's possible. And we work with the Svalbard police, and I think that there's plenty of applications that they could be using it on a day-to-day basis. So we hope to unlock all of those things in 2019.
Okay. Yeah, just for those who don't know, we were both at the Nordic drone event, which was in Svalbard, an archipelago north of Norway. So it's kind of a chilly place.
Yeah. Chilly, even in the end of the summer months, it was still probably freezing or around there.
But it obviously gave you some good ideas I hadn't even thought about polar bear denning. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, well, if they can map where those dens are without putting someone in harm's way, I think that that's beneficial for that culture that lives every day with these very dangerous and curious animals.
Yeah. And again, with infrared flying, they have 4 months of total darkness. So that would be kind of give you a leg up to try to keep an eye on people or animals or other things.
Absolutely. I think just monitoring in general is huge. And, how they explained it to us is we're in the harshest environment in the world, right? It's cold, it's windy, it's remote. There's not a lot of like support from anywhere that's nearby. So they have to fend for themselves, and they have polar bears and they have long winters. And I think that this technology is perfect for that environment, and UAS technology as well. So I think that for a breeding ground for smart technology to come together and start, working out solutions. If it works there, it can work anywhere. It's like New York.
Absolutely. And they have more polar bears than people, so they definitely have to keep an eye on them.
But let us both be honest with anyone listening to this. They have more polar bears than people, but you will see a lot more people than you'll see polar bears.
Absolutely true. We did not see any. So
we did not see any
on that trip. Maybe a later.
Next time.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time talking with us today.
Yeah, Brett, it's a pleasure. And AUVSI as a leader in this industry is really valued by FLIR and everyone in the industry that gets to go to one meeting place and have meaningful conversations about it. So I appreciate you inviting me on as a guest, and I hope we do more of this in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Perfect. All right, my friend.